The rope had cut into her wrists on the second day, and now the skin there had gone the color of a storm cloud, purple-gray and tender in a way that made her think of overripe fruit, which meant infection was coming if the cold didn't get her first. The holding chamber beneath the Covenant Hall had no fire, no window, nothing but stone walls and the sound of water dripping somewheres in the dark. And Eris had not eaten in 3 days. She stood now at the edge of the stone dais in the center of the hall, bare feet on ice-cold marble, dressed in the ceremonial shift that Ingra had chosen for her, white linen so thin it was nearly translucent, meant to show her off, meant to make her look valuable and unthreatening at the same time. It hung from her shoulders like tissue paper. The ribs beneath it were visible. There was a white moth on the column to her left. She had noticed it when they brought her in. It had landed on the carved stone dragon head at the base of the pillar, and it had not moved since, folding and unfolding its wings with the unhurried patience of something that had not been told how it was supposed to feel about today. Eris kept her eyes on it. The Covenant Hall of Dunmere was full of clan lords, each seated at their carved stone chairs around the dais, each wearing the furs and sigils of their bloodline. They were reviewing her the way a man reviews a piece of property, with interest, with appraisal, with an absolute absence of regard for what the property might feel about the process. Ingra had told her this would happen. Ingra had been explaining this to her for 6 years. You have no dragon. Ingra's voice flat as a blade laid on a table. Your mother was common blood. What you carry in your veins is half water and half wind, and worth nothing to anyone except as a political gesture. The least you can do is be a useful political gesture. Eris had not argued. She had stopped arguing at 15, when she understood that arguing only gave Ingra something to punish her for. She rubbed her thumb over the 3 copper buttons in her closed fist. They were all she had left of her mother. She had taken them from the lining of her mother's blue coat the night Ingra had ordered everything burned. She had been 12 years old, and she had swallowed the buttons to hide them from the servants, and retrieved them later, which was the most undignified act of preservation she had ever performed, and also the one she was most proud of. She had rubbed the buttons smooth over 8 years. They fit the pad of her thumb now like they had been made for it. Tribute daughter of House Aldenmore, the herald said. His voice bounced off the stone vault of the ceiling. Eris Aldenmore, 23 years of age, no dragon, no ascended form, offered by the Lady Ingra, matron of Aldenmore, as tribute to satisfy the debt of House Aldenmore to the Dunmere Covenant. She can manage a household, ride, and speak 3 languages. He added the last part the way you list features on something you are not confident about selling. The second horse from the left, not as fast as the others, but the saddles in decent condition. Someone in the circle of clan lords laughed, a male voice, comfortable with its own amusement. Eris did not look at him. She looked at the moth. She had not cried in 4 years. She had used up her tears the night Ingra had locked her in the granary for 3 days because she had spoken back at the dinner table. A single sentence, calmly delivered, factually correct, for which she had been punished with darkness and cold and nothing to eat but a handful of millet she had scraped from the floor. She had counted the grains because she had nothing else to do. 31 grains. She remembered the number because she had thought, this is what my voice is worth to her, 31 grains. She was not going to cry in front of the Dunmere Covenant. The bidding began. It was not bidding, technically. She was not being sold, she was being assigned, which was the polite word for the same thing. Clan lords could claim a tribute daughter for their household, their politics, their alliances, and the Covenant would sanction it. It gave Ingra's debt cover. It gave Eris a new owner. The language was different. The architecture was the same. House Fenrath will take her, a lord said from across the dais. House Aldenmore retains right of review, Ingra said from her seat, smoothing the front of her coat. We prefer. She was offered as tribute. The right of review is forfeit. Ingra's jaw tightened. Eris watched the exchange the way you watch weather from inside a building, through glass, safely separated from the fact that it was about to affect your entire life. The moth opened its wings, and then every voice in the hall stopped. Not quieted, stopped the way a clock stops, mid-word, mid-syllable, as if someone had reached in and pulled the mechanism. Eris heard it before she understood it. A sound underneath sound, not hoofbeats, but something lower and more fundamental, a resonance in the stone floor that came up through her bare feet and settled in her sternum like a second heartbeat. Then the temperature in the hall dropped, not gradually, like a door had been opened onto winter. Every clan lord in the hall was looking at the side entrance. The Dragon King of the Iron-Spine Dominion had not been expected until the following morning. He arrived through the hall's service entrance, which no one used because it was meant for staff, which meant he had walked through the back corridors of Dunmere Keep rather than through the ceremonial gates. That told her something about him before she had even seen his face. He did not need ceremony. He had simply decided to arrive, and here he was. His 2 guards came first, each enormous and armored in charcoal grey plate, the Iron Spine insignia, a black dragon ascending hammered into their chest pieces, but Eris could not look at the guards. He was taller than both of them, and broader through the shoulder in the way of a man built for actual violence rather than the performance of it. He wore riding leathers still dusted from the road, a dark coat, no ceremony, no concession to the fact that he had just walked into a hall full of clan lords who were all currently holding their breath. His hair was dark and windswept, and he had not bothered to smooth it. His face was not handsome in any way that wanted to please you. It was a face built for endurance, a jaw like a ledge, a nose that had met something hard at some point, and bore the record of it, dark, weathered skin, and his eyes were the color of a storm front, deep grey-blue, the shade of sky right before lightning. They were looking at her. Not at the room, not at Ingra, not at the clan lords who had all simultaneously remembered their manners and were in the process of rising from their chairs. At her, at Eris, standing on the cold marble dais in the too-thin shift, with her bruised wrists and her 3 copper buttons and her bare feet, while the clan lords rearranged themselves around the sudden gravitational fact of his presence. Dragon King Zareth of the Iron Spine Dominion, the man who had ended the Covenant War at 24 through a combination of military force and a political brutality so efficient it had become legend, the man whose dragon, they said, was the size of a warship and the color of a thundercloud, and had not been fully controllable since the death of his twin sister when they were children. Some called him the Iron Judge, others called him the Storm's Eye. He was 31 years old, and he had never claimed a mate. He crossed the hall in 12 steps. The crowd parted the way water parts for a stone dropped into it, fast, and with no choice in the matter. He stopped at the edge of the dais. He was looking at her, the way the ocean looks at a shore, like something that had been moving toward her from an enormous distance and had just arrived, and had no intention of going back. And Eris, who had not felt anything approximating fear in 4 years, felt it, not fear of him, fear of what her chest was doing. Something in the center of her ribs, something that had been quiet so long she had stopped noticing its absence, had begun to press outward, like a hand pushing against the inside of a door. Mate. The word did not come from his mouth. It came from below his mouth, below his voice, from the part of him that was not a man in riding leathers, who had walked through the servant corridors of Dunmere Keep. It came from the dragon. The sound hit her chest like a struck bell. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the rope binding her wrists to the iron post at the center of the dais. The rope jerked taut and the bruised skin screamed, and she would have gone down if he had not. She did not see him move. She only registered the result. If he had not been on the dais and his arm had not been around her waist, and her face had not ended up pressed against his chest. He smelled like ozone and cold stone, and something underneath that was just the particular scent of his blood running close to the surface, and it hit her brain like the first breath of clean air after a long time underground, and she made a sound she had never made in her life. Not pain, not fear. Arrival. His hand found the rope. She felt the muscles in his forearm go rigid, tendons standing like cables under the skin, and for one moment nothing happened, and then the rope didn't break so much as cease. The fibers simply parted, as if they had been waiting for a reason to let go. He looked at what was underneath, the bruising, the raw skin, the rings the binding had left in her wrists. His jaw set. A muscle jumped at the corner of it. His eyes, those storm-grey eyes, went several degrees darker in a way that had nothing to do with the light in the hall. "Who?" he said. One word. Ingra, from her chair across the dais, said in her most controlled voice, "My king." The girl was offered as legitimate tribute under the Covenant Accords. The binding is standard procedure. Get it off her. The binding is a formality, my king, if you simply allow. He turned his head to look at Ingra, just his head, just the look. Ingra snapped her fingers at the nearest servant. The knots came undone in seconds. When the last loop fell free from Eris's wrists, the sudden absence of pressure was so complete that her vision tilted. She swayed. His arm tightened and he held her upright the way you hold something that has been under too much stress for too long, carefully, with the awareness that it might not trust your steadiness yet. He took off his coat, efficient, one-handed, and then the coat was around her shoulders, and it was warm from his body and heavy, and it smelled like the road and ozone and him, and she pulled it around herself with both hands and felt something rise in her chest that she had not felt since she was small enough to sit in her father's lap before he died, and left her to Ingra. Safe. The word came up from somewhere very deep, like a bubble released from the bottom of still water. "My king," his lead guard said from the floor of the hall. "The Covenant meeting, the border terms." Postponed. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "Tell the Covenant I will reconvene when I am ready. If anyone wishes to dispute that timeline, they may take it up with my dragon." He looked down at Eris. She was shaking, not from cold, though she was cold, from the overload of it, the bond between them, because that was what it was. She understood it without being able to name it, the way you understand that a fire is fire before anyone teaches you the word, was a live current, warm and electric and constant, pulsing with every place his skin touched hers, and her body, which had been running on 31 grains of millet and spite and the cold pressure of Ingra's expectations for years, was not equipped to process it. "I'm going to carry you," he said. His voice, directed at her, was different from the voice he'd used on the room. Lower, more careful. Like a man who understood the difference between a command and a conversation. "Nod if that's all right." She nodded, small movement. He lifted her as if gravity had agreed to cooperate, one arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her back, and he carried her the way you carry something precious that has been dropped too many times, with deliberate care and an undercurrent of fury aimed entirely at everyone who had dropped it before. She did not see the hall behind them as he carried her out. She saw the moth. It had flown from the column and was drifting toward the high window above the side entrance, pale wings catching the grey winter light. She fainted before they reached the door, not the graceful kind. The kind that happens when a body that has been running on cortisol and animal endurance finally receives the signal that it is safe enough to stop. She woke in a room with a fire. She lay still for a long time, just breathing, real bedding, a pillow, wool blanket tucked close, fire crackle and wood smoke, and underneath it, faint but unmistakable, ozone and cold stone. He was nearby. She opened her eyes. The room was a tower chamber, curved stone walls, a narrow window showing sky the color of pewter, a table near the fire with a clay bowl steaming on it, The smell reached her a half-second later, lamb broth, thyme, the deep richness of long-simmered bone. Her empty stomach seized. Slowly, his voice said. He was sitting in the chair by the window, forearms on his knees, hands loose between them. He had changed, dark shirt, sleeves rolled back, and in the firelight she could see old scars on his forearms, burn scars mostly, silver and irregular, the kind that came from something that had not been done to him by anyone else. If you eat too fast, you'll get sick. Start with the broth. She stared at him. He watched her the way a man watches a deer at the edge of a forest, patient, without the particular tension of someone who expects it to bolt but will chase it if it does. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I need you to know that before anything else." Her voice, when she tried it, came out like gravel scraped across stone. "Why? Why are you not going to hurt me? Why any of it? The Dais, the rope." She stopped, swallowed. "Why me?" He was quiet for a moment. The fire shifted, a log settling with a soft collapse of embers. "Because you are my mate," he said. "No hesitation, no hedge. My dragon has been searching for 12 years. I have attended every gathering, every treaty summit, every covenant session in every territory from the Iron Spine to the Ashwater coast." He paused, his jaw flexed. "And today I arrived a day early through the servants' entrance of a second-rate keep in the northern middle of nowhere, because the Lord here couldn't stop talking about his grain tariffs, and I found you standing on a block of stone in a linen rag with your wrists tied, and my dragon—" He stopped. The pause had weight to it. "My dragon almost leveled the hall. It took everything I had to hold him back. So when you ask me why, there is no why. There is only you. There has been only you. I simply didn't know your face until this morning." Eris sat up. The blanket fell. She was wearing a clean linen shirt, soft, the ceremonial shift gone. Her wrists had been bandaged. She touched the left one carefully. "Who tended me?" "The keep's healer." She came immediately. His voice changed on the next words. Flattened the way a blade goes flat when someone is controlling it deliberately. She also noted the scarring along your ribs. Old bruising, healed wrong. Eris said nothing. "How long?" he said. "Since I was 15. She said it the way she said most things about Ingra, flatly, like reading off a list of weather. After my father died, she took guardianship because clan law required it. She said I would work off the estate's obligations. The obligations kept growing." His hands, resting on his knees, slowly closed into fists. She watched the tendons shift under the skin and understood, without being told, that the deliberateness was for her benefit. He was showing her where the violence was aimed. Not at her. Never at her. "Ingra Aldenmore," he said. "Matron of a small house in the northern reaches, apparently unobserved by anyone with the authority to observe her." "That was not an accident," Eris said. "She is very careful about what she shows to whom." He nodded once, stood, brought the bowl to the bedside and held it out. Their fingers touched on the clay rim, and the current between them spiked, warm and startling and bone-deep, and the thing pressing against her ribs leaned toward him the way a compass needle swings north. She drank the broth slowly. It was the best thing she had tasted in 3 years. Not because of any skill in the making of it, because she was warm and unbound and alive, and a man who could have ignored her existence entirely had instead postponed a political summit to sit in a tower room while she recovered. She set the bowl down when her stomach warned her, pressed her palm flat against her ribs, and breathed through the cramp. "I don't have a dragon," she said. She said it the way she always said it, matter of fact, a given, but underneath the flatness was something else, a preemptive apology. "Whatever you think you found, you're mistaken. Whatever the bond is telling you, it may be wrong. Your mother was not human." She went still. He said it the way he said everything, with the certainty of a man who did not spend words on things he was not sure of. "How do you know that?" "Because a true mate bond doesn't form between a pure bloodline dragon and a half-blood. The bond magic doesn't recognize a diluted line. If I'm feeling what I am feeling, he met her eyes, and I assure you that I am, then you are fully dragon. Whatever you were told about your mother was a lie. She shook her head, not in denial, in the particular vertigo of having the floor of what you understood about yourself suddenly rearranged. Then why have I never shifted? Why is there nothing there? I don't know yet. He reached forward slowly, giving her time to move away. His fingertips rested against the bandage at her wrist. The warmth of his skin through the gauze made the pressing thing in her chest lean toward him the way a flower leans toward light. But I intend to find out, and when I do, whoever is responsible for caging what you carry is going to answer for every year of it. He sent for a practitioner named Tura. She arrived 2 days later on a horse that looked like it had been ridden since before sunrise, a lean, weathered woman with deep-set eyes and hands permanently stained with the particular black of old ink and burnt herbs. She was a blood worker, one of the rare practitioners who worked with the inherited magic of dragon bloodlines. She looked at Eris for about 4 seconds and then turned to Zareth and said, "Where did you find this girl?" "Tribute Dais, Dunmere." Tura's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes went very still. She approached Eris with the focused attention of someone reading a text in a language most people had forgotten, took her hands, turned them over, and pressed her thumbs into the center of each palm. The room went cold, not gradually, all at once. Eris felt it, a pressure against something inside her that had no physical location she could name, like a wall she had been standing against her whole life and had simply stopped noticing was there. The wall pushed back. Tura dropped her hands and exhaled slowly through her nose. "This binding," she said, "was not placed by a common practitioner. This is old work, bloodline-level sealing, the kind used to hide a dragon of significant lineage from those who would recognize it." She looked at Eris. "Girl, what was your mother's name?" "I don't know. My father never." Eris stopped. Her mouth was dry. "Ingra told me she was human, that she left." "She was not human, and she did not leave." The fire crackled, wind pressed against the window. "Whoever your mother was," Tura said, "she carried a line significant enough that someone went to considerable lengths to make sure it never showed. The binding structure." She paused. "It was placed on you in infancy. It required the donor's own power to construct it, which means your mother was alive when it was built." Eris thought about the 3 copper buttons in her pocket, smooth from 8 years of rubbing, cut from a blue coat she could not remember, except as a color and a smell, and the specific feeling of standing in her father's doorway, watching Ingra's servants carry it down the stairs to be burned. "She placed the binding herself," Zareth said. "It was not a question. And very likely died of the effort shortly after." Tura's voice was careful in the way that people's voices are careful when they are delivering information that will rewrite someone's history. Sealing a powerful dragon bloodline inside an infant would have taken everything she had. Eris looked at the fire. She had nothing to say. She felt the ground of what she had understood about her life shift beneath her. Not collapsing, but rearranging, the way tectonic plates move. Slow, enormous, impossible to stop once it had started. "What line is she?" Zareth asked. Tura was quiet for a long moment. "I'll need time to confirm it fully," she said, "but the signature in the binding, the old storm work, the lunar patterning." She looked at Eris with an expression that was not quite pity and not quite reverence. "I believe this girl is Stormborn." The Stormborn were not a pack or a house. They were a bloodline, a lineage of dragons whose power was tied to weather and light. The ones who could call lightning, who could calm a storm or start one, who could speak truth into the bones of any dragon regardless of rank and have it heard. For centuries they had been the arbiters of the great disputes, the ones the clans sent for when 2 territories went to war, and no one wanted the war to actually end in ash. 30 years ago, the Stormborn had been killed. Not in battle, quietly, over a single winter. Every identified Stormborn had been found dead. Illness, accident, misfortune, until there were none left to identify. Their records were burned, their histories were revised. Within a generation they had become legend, the kind of legend that old dragons mentioned once and didn't repeat. Eris's mother had been the last. She had gone into hiding, taken a new name, mated with a minor lord of the northern reaches, and given birth to a daughter, and she had sealed that daughter's dragon away before anyone could see what color it would be. She was protecting you, Tura said on the third morning of their sessions. If your dragon had manifested, the lineage markings would have identified you immediately. And whoever killed the Stormborn would have come for me, Eris said. Yes. And Ingra knew. Tura did not answer that directly. She didn't need to. Ingra knew what I was, Eris said. Her voice was steady. It surprised her. That's why she kept me. Not because I was worthless, because I was only useful if no one else knew what I was worth. She looked at her own hands, still bandaged at the wrists. Ingra had never struck her directly. She had other people for that, or she used cold and hunger and the particular slow cruelty of someone who understood that you didn't need to use your fists to break a person. You just needed to be patient and have control of the food. In the corner of the room, a white moth had found its way through the gap at the window. It sat on the stone sill, wings slowly opening and closing. On the fourth morning, Ingra arrived. She came with a guard of 12, and her chin at the angle she always used when she was pretending she was not afraid. Eris heard the horses from her window, and her body reacted before her mind could manage it. Shoulders pulling in, breath going shallow, the particular stillness of a creature that has learned to take up less space when that sound arrives. Then her dragon stirred. Not the caged thing, not the sealed thing. This was what Tura had been working toward for 4 days, a presence beginning to wake up, beginning to understand it had room. Cold and enormous and furious in the way that only something long imprisoned can be furious. Patient, precise, incandescent. Eris walked down to the courtyard. Zareth was already there, flanked by his guard commander, Lycan, a compact woman with iron-grey eyes who said approximately 11 words to Eris over 4 days, all of them practical, all of them useful. He had not told Eris to stay inside. He had not told her anything except where to find food and that her door was unlocked. She stood beside him and watched Ingra dismount. Ingra was 51. She carried herself with the posture of a woman who had held a clan for 3 decades through intelligence and the precise application of force, and she surveyed the courtyard with the eyes of someone who was always calculating exits. She wore a grey travelling coat, and her silver hair was neatly pinned, and she looked at Eris the way she always had, as something she owned that had gotten misplaced. "My king," Ingra said, and managed to make the title sound like a chess move. "I understand you've developed a personal interest in this situation. I'm pleased, truly, by any alliance between the Iron Spine and House Aldenmore, but the matter of the girl's status under Covenant law is settled," Eris said. Every head in the courtyard turned. She had not planned to speak first, but her dragon was pressing behind the words, and for the first time in 8 years she did not swallow them back. Under the Covenant Accord, 3rd Revision, a tribute claim is void if the tribute can demonstrate that the offering was made under material misrepresentation. Her voice was even. "You presented me as a common-blooded member of House Aldenmore with no ascended form. I am not. I am Stormborn. The misrepresentation voids your claim entirely. I owe you nothing." Ingra's face did not change, but her color did. "That bloodline is extinct," Ingra said, and her voice was very controlled. "Not entirely. You have no proof. I have a blood worker's assessment. I have the structure of the binding placed on me in infancy, which traces to Stormborn lineage magic." Eris paused. "And I have 31 grains of millet." The courtyard went quiet enough to hear the wind move through the pines beyond the keep walls. "In your granary," 3 days with no food because I spoke a correct fact at your table. She held Ingra's eyes. You knew what I was. You kept me because a storm-born under your control was worth more than a storm-born free. You offered me as tribute because you needed your debt cleared and you believed no one would look closely enough to know the difference. Ingra recovered quickly. She was not a woman who stayed off balance for long. Take her, she said. Her voice had lost the diplomacy. She is clan property under. Zareth moved. Not fast by his standards, but fast enough that he was between Ingra and Eris before the sentence finished, and his hand was around Ingra's wrist, not her throat, a precision Eris suspected was deliberate, a degree of restraint that cost him something, and Ingra had gone very still, and her guards had not moved because the Ironspine guards' hands had moved first. Ingra Oldenmore, Zareth said, and his voice in this register was the voice that had ended the Covenant War. You sealed my mate inside a false life. You starved her. You knew what she was, and you used it, and you offered her at a tribute Dais for less than the price of a decent horse. His grip didn't tighten, but didn't release. And before any of that, you or someone in your employ placed a binding on her dragon that imprisoned it for 23 years. He tilted his head. Tell me why I shouldn't let my dragon answer for every one of those years. Ingra's face had gone white. Clan law. A matron cannot be executed without covenant review. I am the covenant. It was Folan who spoke next. Ingra's nephew, 25, who had held her stirrup for the ride and had been silent since arriving, and who now stepped forward from the line of Oldenmore guards with his hands at his sides and his jaw tight. She'll stand review, Folan said. His voice was not steady, but it did not break. She'll answer for all of it properly. But you'll let her stand, my lord. Zareth looked at him for a long moment. Eris put her hand on Zareth's arm, not to stop him. He would stop when he chose. She understood that about him already. She did it because the bond was live between them, and through it she sent one clear thing, not words. The feeling of sitting in a granary in the dark, counting, the feeling of 31, the feeling of choosing, even in the dark, not to become the thing that put you there. He released Ingra's wrist. She stumbled back a step, caught herself, pressed her hand to her wrist, and looked at Eris, with an expression Eris had never seen on her face before. Not hatred, not calculation, something older and more complicated than either, the look of a woman who had built her entire architecture out of controlling things smaller than herself, and was only now, standing in the cold open air of a courtyard, beginning to understand the shape of the damage. It was not an awakening. It was a reckoning. The difference is that an awakening implies change. A reckoning merely implies understanding. Whether anything lay underneath the structure of her cruelty remained to be seen. Review, Zareth said. At Ironspine, under full covenant witness, she will answer for every year. He turned his back on Ingra. The ultimate dismissal, not because she wasn't dangerous, but because she was no longer dangerous enough. Lycan, he said, detain the Oldenmore delegation. Fowlan was the last to be disarmed. He handed his blade over without resistance, and when Eris caught his eyes across the courtyard, he held her gaze and did not look away first. She had always known Folan was different from his mother. He had also been present once. Not while Ingra punished her directly, but at the edge of it, standing in the doorway with an expression she had never been able to read. But he had also, once, left a candle outside the granary door on the second night, when the darkness had been absolute. He had not left a note. The candle had simply been there, pushed through the gap at the bottom. She had had no way to light it, but she had held it in the dark, and it had mattered in a way she could not explain, and had never tried to. She crossed the courtyard to him. The candle, she said. He looked at the ground, then back at her. His jaw was tight and his eyes were the color of old ice, and he said, I knew what she was doing was wrong. I always knew. I told myself I was too young, then I told myself I wasn't in a position to stop it, and then I stopped telling myself anything because it's easier not to think about it. He did not look away. The candle was worthless. I know that. You couldn't even light it. He stopped. His voice had gone rough. I needed there to be something, even something useless. Eris looked at him for a long time. The wind moved through the courtyard, carrying the distant smell of pine and cold granite. Go back to Aldenmoor, she said. When this is done, work with whoever the Covenant appoints. Build something different. He stared at her. You'd trust me with that. I'm giving you the chance to be worth trusting. A pause. The candle mattered. Not because it was enough, because it was something in the dark when there was nothing. She met his eyes. Don't waste it. He nodded once and let himself be led away. The road to Ironspine took 8 days. Eris rode beside Zareth on a grey mare that Lycan had chosen for her. Steady, smooth-gaited, with the patient temperament of a horse that had carried uncertain riders before and held no grudges about it. During those 8 days, several things happened. She learned to shift. The first time had been uncontrolled. Tura had broken the final layer of the binding in a session that cracked the floor and blew every candle out simultaneously, and what came through the breach was white and enormous and so incandescently furious that it had taken the better part of 2 hours, and Zareth's full presence to settle into anything approaching cooperation. The second time was better. By the 5th attempt, she could release and return in under a minute, riding the pain instead of being drowned by it. By the 8th attempt, her dragon ran alongside the column of riders through the mountain pass, and even Lycan, watching from the rear, said quietly to no one in particular, "She runs like weather." She also began to understand what she was to Zareth, not just a mate, not just a bond partner. His dragon had been sliding out of control for years, growing more volatile since his sister's death, pressing harder against the boundaries of the man who contained it. She had calmed it completely, not with power, not with storm-born ability, with the bond itself. With the simple fact of her presence. She was not a prize, she was not a symbol. She was a key, and the lock she fit was the one that kept the most powerful dragon in the north from destroying everything it loved. On the 5th night, camped in a valley where the stars were close enough to feel personal, Zareth stopped beside her at the fire. When we reach Ironspine, he said, the Covenant will expect a formal claiming, the bond seal. It carries political weight. You become bound to the territory, to the dragon line, to me in ways that can't be undone. He looked at her steadily. I will not do it without your clear choice. I need you to know that. She looked back at him, at the firelit scars, at the storm-grey eyes that had crossed a continent looking for her without knowing her face. I spent 23 years, she said, being told that what I carried wasn't real, that my dragon was a rumor, that I was a gesture at best and an obligation at worst. She reached up and put her hands on his face, his jaw rough with days of travel, his skin warm from the fire. You walked into that hall and your dragon said one word, and it was the truest thing I have ever heard in my life. Eris. I'm not saying yes because of the bond, she said. I'm saying yes because you unlocked a door and stepped back and waited to see what I'd choose. She held his eyes. I choose this. I choose you. Not because I have to, because it is the first real choice I have ever been given, and I want to use it correctly. He kissed her. It was not gentle. It was the kiss of a man who had been looking for 12 years and had found what he was looking for standing on a tribute dais in a linen shift with rope burns on her wrists, and who had held his dragon back through sheer force of will until she was ready. It was desperate and exact and thorough, and the bond between them ignited not a thread, not a current. A storm front, immense and warm and absolute. When they broke apart, the fire had burned down to embers. Somewhere beyond the camp, a dragon called, then another, then the whole of Zareth's guard one by one, voices rising into the cold, star-filled mountain air, because they could feel the bond through the Dominion's deep magic, because it was already complete in every way that mattered. The bond seal was performed on the night of the full moon in the Hall of Stone Crowns, the great chamber carved from the living rock at the mountain's heart. Columns of black granite rose to a ceiling lost in shadow, and the torchlight turned everything amber and gold. Eris wore dark green, high neck, her wrists uncovered at the cuff, the scarring visible where the rope had been. She had chosen that. They were not shame. They were the record of what she had survived to stand here. Zareth crossed the hall toward her through a crowd of hundreds. Black coat, no armor, no concession. His eyes were on her, and his expression was the one she had first seen at the tribute Dais, stripped of every mask, raw with the weight of what he felt, and through the bond she could feel it clearly now, not just desire, not just possession. Gratitude, deep, bone-level gratitude for the fact that she existed and had survived and was standing in this hall with her scars visible, choosing him. He stopped before her. "Eris," he said, and his voice carried through the silent hall. "Before these witnesses, before the old stone, before the bond already between us, I ask, will you take my seal?" She thought of the tribute Dais and the cold marble and the linen shift and 31 grains of millet. She thought of ozone and cold stone and a coat still warm from his body. She thought of a door that was unlocked and a man who waited on the other side of it to see what she would do. "Yes," she said. He kissed her first, briefly, and then his mouth moved to her wrist, to the scar left by the rope, still pink and raised and real, and he pressed his lips there, and the seal mark rose beneath the skin like heat, like recognition, like something that had always been meant to be there and was only now finding its place. The hall erupted, not in voices, in sound below voice, the deep, resonant chest sound of hundreds of dragons acknowledging their Luna, rolling through the stone and up through the floors and into the bones of the mountain itself. Zareth lifted his head and looked at her. His face was open, no king, no iron judge, no storm's eye, just a man who had been searching for 12 years and was finally, completely done. He rested his forehead against hers. "Mine," he said. "Yours," she said. "Try not to be insufferable about it." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, that fraction of a millimeter, and then it became an actual smile, real, unguarded, transforming the severe architecture of his face into something she had not been prepared for the first time and was still not. Somewhere in the crowd behind her, she was almost certain she heard Lycan make a sound that was not consistent with Lycan's professional reputation. Months later, she would stand on the highest parapet of Ironspine Keep in the early morning, wrapped in a fur that smelled like cedar and cold stone, watching the sun climb over the peaks and set the snow on fire with light the color of raw honey. Her dragon would be awake inside her, moving through her blood with the ease of long practice, no longer pressing against anything, simply present. As she was simply present, as she had perhaps always been, underneath everything that had tried to tell her she wasn't. Zareth would come up behind her without announcement. She always felt him through the bond before she heard him, and wrap his arms around her and rest his chin on the top of her head, and they would stand like that while the mountains burned gold around them. She would not say anything about fate or destiny or the 12 years he had spent looking. She would reach into the pocket of the fur and take out 3 copper buttons, smooth as river stones from years of rubbing, and set them on the stone wall of the parapet. The white moth landed beside them. It folded its wings open once, then closed them. Eris set a piece of bread on the stone beside the buttons. The moth considered this, then it ate. She left her hand resting on the parapet in the cold morning air, and the man behind her was warm, and the mountains were gold, and somewhere below, her dragon breathed. The moth flew. She watched it go.